We learned in the third grade that the government of the state of California is modeled after the federal government and is composed of three branches: the executive, the legislative, and judicial. And just like the federal government, the California legislature consists of two bodies, the Assembly and the Senate. The California Assembly for years has been dominated by Democrats who now control a whopping 65% of the voting share. Needless to say, being a conservative Republican in this very liberal state has its challenges. Nobody knows this better than Matt Harper, the current assemblyman for the 74th District, which is composed of mostly wealthy communities along the coast of Orange County. Harper grew up in California and rose through the ranks of government, starting off as the youngest school trustee in Orange County's history. He then easily won a seat on his town's city council to become its mayor, where he earned a reputation as a conservative, pro-business, and afraid of nothing kind of politician. Finally, in 2014, he decisively won a seat on the California Assembly with 20% margin over his competition. We have been watching him advance over the years and wanted to know his secret for success. And with the November elections fast approaching, we decided it's time to check in with him and find out how he plans to retain his seat in the Assembly against a young, up-and-coming woman challenger. Thank you for joining us at the beautiful Pasea Hotel and Spa in Huntington Beach. This hotel just opened in June, and I heard you had a role in it. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Before I was a state assemblyman for the coastal Orange County area, I got to be the mayor for the city of Huntington Beach right here, and it was also on the city council. And so this project, when I ran for city council, was just a hole in the ground. It had been approved initially over 10 years earlier. They had started working on it before the last recession, and for many, many years it was just this hole in the ground with concrete and rebar sticking out, and it was kind of an eyesore, to be honest, under the previous ownership. But one thing that people had asked when I was running for city council was, what are you going to do about that hole in the ground? And I said, you know what, we make sure that the government stays out of the way so that we can allow entrepreneurs to be able to take care of the project. And once the financing came back around and the economy started getting better, then they were really interested in getting this project back up and running. And so the owner had subdivided this property into three parts. You know, one was the apartment side, the commercial side had been taken over by the folks that have the Bellaterra Mall, but this part was put together by the same group that used to have the Montage, has the Balboa Bay Resort. And wow, have they put together something, because what we did is we give some final approvals to some of the changes that they made. And then as mayor, I got to break ground along with the folks putting together this hotel. And that's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about a matter of months. They got this thing from, as I said, just a hole in the ground to being right up there with some of the great hotels on the coastline here in Huntington Beach.
It's absolutely beautiful. You've been in politics for almost 20 years. You started by being elected to Huntington Beach Union High School District. You were re-elected in 2002 with the most votes and won uncontested in 2006. Now, that's quite a large school district. Was that challenging to run?
Yes, it was. Huntington Beach Union High School District has all the city of Huntington Beach, most of Fountain Valley, most of Westminster, even a part of Garden Grove. It's bigger than most state legislative districts. Yeah, I was vastly outspent, but you know what really matters when it comes to a campaign is that person-to-person contact, and I did a lot of it. I walked neighborhoods, knocked on doors and talked to individuals, and did that for several months going into the first campaign as well as the second campaign, and it really paid off. It really pays off not only to get your message directly to voters, but also listen to what they have to say.
In 2010, you ran for the Huntington Beach City Council. By 2013, you were the mayor.
Yes.
Of Huntington Beach. And what were your most noticeable accomplishments as mayor?
Well, you have to kind of look at it as a whole because, of course, in Huntington Beach, mayor is the presiding officer for the city council. It is a very ceremonial position, but still very important in terms of leadership within the community. But some of the projects that I undertook as a council member came to real fruition as the mayor for the city. One of them was when I was on the school board, we had gotten rid of the skate park that was over at Huntington Beach High School. Folks wanted to expand the stadium at Huntington Beach High School, and what that would do is take out a skate park that had located there in the mid-1980s. Well, I thought that was very important for the youth and for many people who skateboard here in Huntington Beach, that we have a facility that measures the interest that we have here within the city. And so I tried to work for a deal that would have a replacement for that skate park in a different location. And so the city got some funds from the school district to be able to do that. But that same recession started at that time, and suddenly building a skate park wasn't such a big priority for the city. Well, I ran for city council. I talked a lot about that as an unfulfilled promise for the city. And so when people heard that, the good thing is that a lot of people were listening. And some of the folks that were listening were Vans. And eventually, when I got onto the council, Vans started talking to me, Councilman Don Hansen, and others within the city in terms of, they said, if the city can locate land to be able to build a skate park, that they would fund the building of that skate park. All they asked was a few days to be able to hold championships and contests on that site, and of course be able to utilize their name on the park. Fair enough trade. And so that project got underway while I was on the city council, broke ground, and I was able to be there with my old skateboard, the last one that I had bought, I think when I was about 8 years old or so, and we were ready to go. They put it together, and while as mayor, it opened up, and so that was a really great thing. A second project, which really means a lot to me, is that when I ran for council, I vowed to be committed to building a new senior center for the city of Huntington Beach. We had this old ramshackle senior center that was buildings that had been World War II era, and certainly a senior center that was too small for the almost 200,000 person city that Huntington Beach is today. And so there were some obstacles. There were some folks who didn't want it built in the location that it had been approved by the voters. But I was very adamant that when the voters had approved the ballot initiative, that the voters wanted a new senior center built in Central Park just across from Huntington Beach Central Library. And so I was joined along with Dave Sullivan and some others who are committed to that same goal. And as mayor, we broke the ground on that new senior center. And you know what? The construction on that was incredibly fast because that just opened a few weeks ago as well, and so people are being able to utilize that new senior center. Oh, and of course the last thing that I'm very proud of is making sure to be able to roll back a lot of laws that we have on the books. I'm very pro-freedom, and I want people to have the most liberty that they can and the least laws that infringe on decisions that we should be able to make in our daily lives. And so several laws we were able to get off the books, just over half a dozen of them, one of them being very popular, the repeal of the 1987 fireworks ban.
So you're taking care of both the youth and the seniors across the board,
Yes.
all ages, and everyone does love the fireworks.
Yes, it's true.
Very patriotic.
Still get compliments whenever I'm in the 4th of July parade about people loving the fireworks being able to come back on their own blocks.
So you were serving as mayor in 2013 and 2014, and you ran for state assembly. In the 2014 primaries, you came in second to Newport Beach City Council member Keith Curry.
Yes.
By 1,700 votes, but in the election you won by 19,000 votes.
Yes.
Now in the 2016 primaries, you were second again, this time by 1,800 behind Karina Onofre. Do you think your pattern of losing in the primaries and winning the general election will continue?
Well, what happens in these top two primaries is that the top two vote getters advance to the runoff. And that's the way it is throughout the state of California. That's law that just changed a couple of elections ago by virtue of Proposition 14, which is this kind of nonpartisan primary system.
In 2014, Costa Mesa Brief covered speeches by you and Karina Onofre. She opened her speech by saying that 80% of the Republicans in Sacramento are men speaking for women. She did follow these statistics up with some sexist remarks against men.
Let me ask you this question. How many women are here? If you could please raise your hand for me and say right here. How many women are here? Right here. A little bit louder. How many? Right here. Okay. So as you can see, even in this meeting today, us women represent the majority. However, in Sacramento, we barely have a strong voice, with 80% of the Republican men speaking for us. Now, I don't know about you, but men are definitely wired differently than women. And if left alone as a pack anywhere, whether it be in Sacramento or in a home, they just are not as organized as women. I say this from experience. When my mother goes to Mexico for a whole week, my parents' house is a mess. And when my dad leaves, it's hard to notice. I mean, aesthetically at least. Because when there is a woman, they regulate. And ladies, I see that there's a lot of things that are not getting done in Sacramento, in part because we need strong women representation.
Do you think her statement holds true that 80% of the Republicans in Sacramento are men speaking for women?
Well, I think that those are some outdated stereotypes that I think are divisive among Americans and Californians, and I certainly don't approve of that kind of rhetoric, especially when you go to Sacramento and Republicans in the caucuses of both the Senate as well as the Assembly have folks like Janet Nguyen, Young Kim, Ling Chang, great leaders like Shannon Grove, Melissa Melendez. We certainly have a very different representative caucus in Sacramento than in the past, and I think that those kinds of remarks are unfortunate.
So just to cover this, what makes me different from the other Republican candidates are 7 things. And just like God created the world in 7 days, there are 7 differences between myself and my 3 male opponents. The first difference, I'm a woman. The second, I'm Latina. The third, I'm fluent in Spanish. The fourth, I represent the aggressively growing ethnic minority in California. The fifth, I was a Democrat before seeing the light and becoming a Republican. So I've been there and I know what it's like and what they do, what they're thinking. Thank you.
Do you think her sexism against men in that speech harmed her message?
I think so, because I think that most folks in Orange County and certainly within this district believe that the most important thing for a legislator isn't the color of their skin or their ethnicity or their gender. It's in fact their ability to be able to listen and to be able to reflect those who live within the district and those who vote and those who are citizens within the district.
I'm a woman, but not just any woman. I'm intelligent, intuitive, an alpha, and the leader. And I'm beautiful, and I'm not afraid or ashamed to say so. My parents made me that way.
Some people feel she's putting too much emphasis on her gender and ethnicity. Why do you think she's doing that?
Well, I think that's an old method of politics to try to divide people among personal traits. And as I said, I think it's outdated, and I think that that would be unwelcome here in coastal Orange County.
So the women's vote is the largest demographic, and the Latina vote is the fastest growing. Do you think she's just pandering to those votes?
I think so, but I think it would fall flat-footed here.
Now let's switch the focus from your opponent to you. What is your platform for 2016?
Well, certainly making sure to stay focused on issues that I have been focused on this past session, primarily being education. Having served on the school board for 12 years, education is very important to me at both the primary, secondary, and post-secondary levels. Our colleges and universities are very important, and I've worked on them on the Higher Education Committee. We have great public universities here within the district with UCI, as well as great community colleges, Orange Coast College and Irvine Valley Colleges, and great private universities like Vanguard, as well as Concordia. And so I'm very proud of the education that we have here within our district and throughout the state of California, and we'll continue working on that. I think that education is the #1 priority for the state of California. It says that within our Constitution, and I believe that right here, and we'll always continue to pursue that. Additionally, making sure that we're focused on jobs and the economy is outright the most important thing to be continuing to work on. And so making sure that we are having a lower tax burden and trying to do everything to trying to lower the tax burden that we have on businesses and job creation here within the state, as well as individuals, making sure that we are reducing the amount of regulation. We're on an uphill climb because there are a lot of folks in Sacramento who want more regulation, but I'm fighting to have less regulation here within the state of California. CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, is now less about environmental quality and more about simply having red tape to be able to stop, delay, and make more expensive major infrastructure projects. And that includes public infrastructure as well as private infrastructure like buildings and factories and manufacturing, etc. And so I think CEQA reform is actually incredibly important. I also think that we need to make sure that California has a less litigious environment. In other words, employers are so at risk of being sued right now that a lot of people are dissuaded from expanding their businesses here in California or locating their business here in California. And our labor laws are moving in one direction, while in most of the country they're moving in the other direction, being more business friendly. We need to be in a more business friendly state. In addition to education and the economy, I'm also focused on our infrastructure. I think we need improvements in our infrastructure and transportation and energy to make sure that we get the electricity that we need for our daily lives and for our jobs. And also, very importantly, we need long-term solutions for water and diversification of our water sources so we can always depend on whenever the tap is pulled open that the pure water always comes out.
Let's focus on the education aspect of your platform. I read on your website you had a statement of resolutions you released in January 2016. And one thing you mentioned in there is that you want 2016 to be the year we improve our education system. You stated, too many children do not get to learn from a quality teacher in a quality school. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, the thing is, in California, we still have a lot of room to go in terms of making sure that our schools are competitive. I believe in school choice. I believe in competition. I do believe in both our public schools as our traditional public schools, but I also think that we need more of an ability of charter schools to be able to meet the educational demands throughout our state. A lot of people who live in my district are very satisfied with the public schools, but there are a lot of people who are not in our local area, but even more so in a lot of the more challenging parts of the state of California. In the inner cities, our education system is still not serving the need. And charter schools have been a way to be able to have that competition and meet those needs specifically to what people need and want for their kids to meet the aspirations of their families. I also believe in choice in terms of vouchers to be able to be competitive with private parochial schools as well. I think that other states have found ways to be able to have a much more competitive education system, and I think that we can do that here within California. I think we need to make sure that we also reduce class size within our traditional public schools as well, to make sure that ratio between teacher and student is as small as we can make it, so that we can have as much on-the-job direct teaching of the student as possible.
What about drawing amazing teachers? How can we do that?
Well, that's the thing, is we do need to make sure that we invest in our schools, that we have the funds that are there. As I said, in terms of a priority with the budget, I think that education is the #1 priority, and that we should be less distracted by a lot of the other things that we like to spend funds on within the state of California, and be more focused on supporting education so that we can attract the best teachers.
Every 2 years you have to run for re-election. Doesn't that seem excessive?
No, I don't. I think that a lot of elected officials would love not to have to run for re-election every election cycle and every 2 years, but I actually enjoy the process. I think it's very important for the voters to be able to throw out their elected officials if they're not doing the job right and not reflecting their interests and their wants. And so being on the ballot every primary election and being in the runoff in every general election, to me is an important exercise to be re-engaged with the public. Be meeting people at community events, in their neighborhoods, at meetings and at town halls. I think is very important because I get to hear what people are concerned with. You can pay for expensive polls to see what people are interested in, but the most effective poll is going out there and listening to what people have to say.
So do you feel like you're campaigning more than you're spending time in Sacramento?
My hope is actually to try to stay within the district more than I'm in Sacramento. So that's actually why I try to, as soon as my job is done up there, to be able to return to the district.
Now, Assembly Bill AB 109 and Proposition 47 have both been blamed for the increase of crime all across California. Many serious crimes are now misdemeanors instead of felonies, and criminals are receiving just tickets that they can ignore instead of being arrested. Is there anything you as an assembly member can do about this?
So this is very tough because there's a very strong soft on crime pursuit within California. They think that they're saving the taxpayers' money when you let criminals out of jail. In reality, everyone loses when criminals are let out of jail too early because you have what's called recidivism. People commit crime again and then have to get put back in because they repeat the offense. We need to make sure that we're tougher on crime within the state of California, not weaker on crime within the state of California. We're seeing an increased level of shoplifting and especially a lot of those nonviolent crimes that are happening. But there's one thing that I'm very concerned about that's coming up on the ballot in November, and that's Proposition 57, and that's the governor's ballot initiative, which is poised to potentially let a lot more people out of our prisons and out of our jails. We're having a very, very serious problem with people who are being let out who shouldn't be let out. And it's making California more dangerous, and it's making our businesses, our families, and our homes more vulnerable to crime. And so one thing that I can ask is that voters please take a serious look at Proposition 57, consider opposing it, because that can make this problem even worse. But voters need to communicate to their legislators throughout the state of California, not just in our local districts, that we need to be serious on crime, because we're in a situation where we could be slouching back to those crime rates of the 1980s and the 1970s, which were just awful within this state.
So those crime rates in the 70s and the 80s is what brought us the three strikes law.
Yes.
The three strikes law, it said, is what overcrowded our prisons. So then the Supreme Court said California had to release some of their felons, which is what brought us Prop 47, AB 109, and now Prop 57. How can we get around the Supreme Court saying we need to lower our prison population and still be tough on crime?
Well, that goes back to one of the issues I talked about in my platform, which is being able to cut the red tape. The problem that we have here within the state of California is that we make it very difficult to be able to build infrastructure. And as I said, whether it's private companies building their infrastructure, but it also means public infrastructure as well. One of those is being able to build the jails and prisons that meet the needs of being able to jail and have the prison population that we need. The jail and prison population shouldn't be determined simply by how much room we have. It should be determined by how many people are convicted and need to be put away. And so if we need to build more facilities, we need to have a system that allows us to meet that need and meet that need quickly. In other words, we should not have a system where it takes us years and years and years and excessive amounts of money to be able to respond to our needs to build prisons or jails. We need to be able to build nimbly. We need to be able to build inexpensively, and we need to be able to build efficiently. We need to have prisons and jails that work that keep people in jail, but we need to be able to build them without the amount of red tape that we have. That's just absolutely incredible. And that way we can solve the prison overcrowding problem, because the reality is we're not able to build the facilities to meet. And we're building education facilities as well. We're very fortunate that a lot of people are very generous in terms of donating funds to be able to help with construction at our UC campuses and our Cal States and other facilities, as well as be able to have bonds to be able to have construction in our education facilities. We've had more Cal States built within the last 20 years. It's absolutely phenomenal what we've done to be able to build our education infrastructure, but we also need to have our law enforcement side taken care of as well.
Okay, so do you think there's any possibility that we could get a law like 3 strikes law back or something similar?
Well, I think that the public, when they're being asked, will almost always ask for us to be tougher on crime. And I think that that we'll see that on this Proposition 57 question coming up.
Okay. Do you think these changes to the laws, making them making felonies misdemeanors, releasing criminals, do you think it's demoralizing to our law enforcement?
Yes, I do. And it's very difficult, especially in some cities where the political leadership I think is not there and not backing law enforcement. Over in the city of Oakland, we've seen them have to go through multiple police chiefs because in large part, I think that the police and the police chiefs don't feel that they have the backing of the city council. And so whether it's at the state level or the local level, we need to back law enforcement a lot more within this state. We need to make sure that we have appropriate reforms to be able to respect people's civil liberties and to be able to improve law enforcement practices. But obviously, in this state, as well as our localities, we need to do a lot more in terms of backing our law enforcement.
Now, your predecessor, Alan Mansour, had trouble getting anything passed in the Assembly. Some say this was because he was a Republican in a sea of Democrats. Have you had any of these same issues?
Very much, and that's what does happen when you have such an imbalance in terms of how the legislature is made up. In fact, when my predecessor was in the Assembly for 2 years, Republicans had less than 1/3 of the total membership of the state assembly. Very big challenge because that means there was zero leverage on any issues, because for tax increases, fortunately, it still has a 2/3 requirement in the state legislature. Now, when I was elected, enough Republicans were elected to make it so that it's just over 1/3, so the Democrats no longer have that 2/3 majority to run roughshod, but they're going to be fighting for it in this next election. And they're fighting for the ability to be able to raise taxes without any checks or balances. And that's why it's so important that we do have Republicans in the state assembly in either existing or growing numbers, because tax increases will just be unrestrained between the governor and the legislature if that indeed happens. Now, I've been in the majority and the minority on the Huntington Beach City Council issues. You can get a lot done when you're in the majority, but it's also very important to be able to articulate the point of view when you're in the minority, because not only can you have an impact on the dialogue, but you can also make sure that you're having an effect on what people choose to do so in the next election. Additionally, one thing that I've found that's very important is locating where people who may be very different than you ideologically, where do you have common issues? One thing that I have found in being able to talk with and get to know other members of the legislature is that every one of us, regardless of our political point of view and the geographies we represent, have commonalities on quite a few different issues. So one legislator that I worked with was David Chu, who was from the city of San Francisco. Very different on the political spectrum, but both of us saw the need to be able to protect riders of low-speed electric bikes. Low-speed electric bicycles were technically illegal on off-road trails, as well as some of the bike lanes around, and so we co-sponsored legislation to make it so that those were legal. And that makes it so that people have access to roads, especially people who are older, maybe injured, looking to commute, and for a variety of other reasons, may need a little help being able to get through a lot of their, maybe a part of their recreational or commute ride and be able to get through it. And so I was very happy to work together with him on that issue, and I've found a lot of other legislators have similar issues like that and be able to work on those to help things be better for Californians.
Do you have any advice for the current presidential candidates?
Oh my, that's a good question. One thing that I certainly would say is I firmly believe that the federal government is involved in too much, especially as I was in the school board, is that the federal government is involved too much within education. I wish the federal government would just leave education to the states and to local school boards to help make the decisions locally for people who value the education of their kids. So I really would ask and recommend to both candidates, please respect federalism, the viewpoint of our founding fathers, in that the federal government was merely a way to be able to coordinate the states, to be able to defend ourselves from common enemies abroad, and to be able to leave most of the issues to us locally, to the citizenry, to the local governments, and to the states.
Is there anything you'd like to add before we conclude the interview?
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with you today. I've certainly very much enjoyed the job of representing coastal Orange County and the communities of Huntington Beach, Costa Mesa, Irvine, Newport Beach, Laguna Woods, and Laguna Beach. And so I'm very proud to be able to represent the citizens in Sacramento. Would like to continue to do so, and can always be reached at my local district office in Costa Mesa, just off of the 405 freeway in Harbor, and look forward to this upcoming campaign.